Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Young Skelling, podcast co host and a parenting educator.
Hi, everyone. I am Connie Beecher, an associate professor in the School of Education, and my expertise is language and literacy development. And I'm also a family well-being specialist.
We are so excited to have Connie back with us for this second episode. And we want to welcome you back to this season. We are talking all about literacy with my personal favorite literacy expert. Last week we introduced the foundations of early literacy. This week we're going to dive deeper into specific ages, starting with our little babies, the infants and toddlers. I know that always the babies.
Your favorite.
Yeah,
Okay, you're not supposed to have favorites, but what's your favorites?
I love babies. Um, so I want to start this conversation with something that I have a question about. I've heard you say something with us in our conversations and in with some of your students, Connie, and you talk about this thing called language nutrition. And in a previous season, we worked with Dr. Lindy Buckingham Shutt, and she shared with us about nutrition. Well, what you're talking about is something different, right? So it's language nutrition. And I'm wondering if you would share more about what that is all about. I know you have a definition, which we always love to start with. So, what is it? What is language nutrition?
Yeah, so a more official definition would be the use of language that is sufficiently rich in engagement, quality, quantity, and context that nourishes a child neurologically, socially, and linguistically. But what that means is, so
Mhm.
in the same way we talk about how nutrition um, is essential for healthy physical development, lots of language is really key for children's healthy cognitive development. So, in a sense, we are providing nutrition enrichment to grow brains.
Yeah. Um, and then, so it's the growing brains. Can you tell us a little bit about like vocabulary development with that?
Yeah, so when we talk about enriching language, we're talking about lots and lots of talking and back and forth, and we'll get into some specifics about that.
Right.
Um, Vocabulary development, hearing a big variety of words is something that is linked to school success. So
Mhm.
when children enter school, and we talked a little bit about school readiness, right, last time. When children enter school, the more words they know, the easier it is for them to learn new words. So we want to be thinking about building that vocabulary with lots and lots of language.
Right. And so, like, there's food groups and nutrition. There's different elements and different groups of ways that we talk about language nutrition. And there's quite a few of these elements. So we wanted to break those down for you. So these are our language nutrition groups or elements. The first one is greetings. So what are greetings?
Greetings is really just what it is, where you're saying
Mhm.
hello, right, to your baby in the morning, um, when
Yeah.
they get up from a nap, after you've been gone. And I will say, like, these categories help us understand not only like how parents actually are talking to children, but as you're thinking about, um, you know, what how you're talking to children, it helps you think about different ways that you're doing that.
Yeah.
So you notice that children often do say like "hi." That's one of their first words because we say that a lot to them.
Hi. 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 Yeah. So those hello, good morning, hi, cutie. Oh, I'm back. Um, Something simple to start with. The next one is narrating actions.
So this is something that often parents will say, "I don't know what to talk about. You want me to talk to my baby?" They're not exactly,
Oh,
saying words yet, right? What are they? They don't know a lot of stuff yet.
right.
Um, but yeah, so something you can do is always just be narrating. So just out loud the things that you are doing. So you can imagine now you're changing and you just say, "Oh, it's time to change you. Oh no, your shirt got dirty with breakfast. Let's take this off. First, I'm going to unsnap these snaps. One, two snaps. And then we're going to pull it over your head. Here comes your left arm. Here comes your right arm." You just honestly are just saying everything that you're doing.
Yeah, we're gonna put on the blue shirt, and next we're gonna put that pants on. Yeah, just
Mhm.
narrating everything going on. Um, Another element is giving direct attention.
So, and it's um, one of the things that adults, we think we talk all day long, right? And the thing that's important about babies is that if you are talking to somebody over here, right? Or if you're talking to a sibling or you're talking to another adult, that language isn't necessarily going to be enriching your child's. It's not part of their language nutrition because it's not directed at them. So one part to think about is directing attention to that child. And then the other thing is the other part that we can think about direct attention is showing them things. So pointing, showing them something to look at together that you're looking at.
Love that. Yeah, we can talk around kids so often, right? Oh, I'm talking to this adult, but making sure that you're talking directly to them, and not just around them. Next one is telling stories. Do you have any storytellers in your family, Connie?
Well, I would say that my brothers tell a tall tale.
Yeah, that cat.
That Yes. But, we all have that person in our family that can tell a family story, right? My husband's dad, for example, has been going to the state fair since he was a boy and he's in his 80s. And so he tells the best stories about going to the fair every year. And he talks about what it was like when he was a kid and he still loves to go.
Yep.
So, family stories. So, yeah, that person might not be there. They might not know that family member, but just, talking about people in your life or important events.
Yeah, and it's not that you're just telling the adults those stories. You can start with the infants and the toddlers.
Mm.
Absolutely. Asking questions. You're asking babies questions, asking toddlers questions.
Yes. So, this is sort of interesting. I think it's fascinating. One of the language research studies showed that when you ask a baby a question and then you pause as if you are waiting for their answer. And now they're gonna do something, right? When you're talking to a baby, like, they'll move, they'll
Sure.
make a noise, they'll
Yep.
drool, whatever, and then you react as if they answered your question. So you can say, like, "Oh my gosh, what do you think? Is it gonna rain today?" And you wait, right, for them to do something, and then you say, "Oh, okay, yeah, maybe. You're right, I did see some clouds." And that kind of language interaction really gets their brains fired up.
It seems like, "What do you mean ask questions?" But it makes so much sense when you explain it. So the next one is soothe.
Yeah, so soothing, um, often with babies, right? The way that they can communicate things is by crying. So we're doing a lot of soothing. And those are just like those little, like, even just sounds that you're making, like, "Oh, it's okay." Yeah, you're making little soothing sounds. And I would put this along with singing, which is the other category too.
Last one.
Um, Singing and soothing. Sometimes, when babies are really upset, singing can be a kind of a good thing to help calm them down, and it also helps you, as the adult. Um, it helps you also not get too upset, but any of
Right.
those kinds of, sounds and singing that you make when and it just happens, right, when children are gonna be upset.
Yeah, and I am a big proponent of singing. I mean, I grew up in a fairly musical household. I did all the music things, but I know that the science behind music and the power of music is so strong too. But I won't go on about that. But singing is such an easy thing, and your baby's not going to judge if you're in tune or not, so it's okay.
I know. Listen, your baby loves the sound of your voice.
Yeah.
They love it. So it doesn't matter. what your singing voice is like.
Absolutely. So those are the elements of language nutrition. Um, and as we think about maybe a good example of kind of these elements, I know as we were planning this episode, you brought up an experiment or research study that was done. That is a great illustration of why these elements are so important. And this is called the still face experiment. I know some people may have heard of this, maybe never have. So, Connie, would you be willing to explain to us what the still face experiment is?
Yeah. So the still face experiment, it is a fairly famous study that was, done a while ago. But basically, the researchers brought a mother and her child into a lab, and they have cameras set up, right, and they're recording everything that's happening. And so they direct the mother just to interact with the child in the way that she normally does. And so they're talking, they're pointing at things in the room, they're just doing their language nutrition, like back and forth,
Stuff.
right? Normal things. And then the researchers tell the mom to not respond to the child and to make her face still. So if you're watching us, imagine my face is just still. And so right away, the baby notices the difference and starts to try to get the mother's attention back. So now the baby is doing all of these things that the mother used to do, like pointing at things and leaning forward and babbling, like trying to say, trying to get the mother's attention. And the researchers have asked her not to respond. So now the child is starting to get upset. I mean,
Mhm.
she even slumps in her chair and she starts to cry, and it's a very distressed cry.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really heartbreaking actually. And that poor mom is sitting there just keeping her face still. So finally the researchers let her respond, and then she goes to soothing, "Oh, here I am. It's okay. I'm right here." Um, and then the child, you know, gets back to normal, like, stops crying. So it really shows the power of
Yes.
how distressing it is for children when their adult, their people in their, lives aren't responding to them.
Yes. It's such a great illustration of those concepts of interaction and that language nutrition. Absolutely. And it does break your heart a little bit to see that, but it's a good study. And it wasn't for very long, but long
It
enough
was
that
really just a couple of seconds, like,
yeah,
if you, for those of us that are soft-hearted, it feels like longer than a
long time. It feels like a long time, but it is a really good explanation or, demonstration of those concepts. Now I'm gonna turn us into a little bit of a different direction, and it still does relate to language nutrition, but it is, um, not only the idea of things that we can do to build language nutrition, but how maybe we use them. I know it's a natural instinct. You already heard me do this where I was talking to babies, babies all cutesy. Hi, baby. How we doing? Right? That high pitch, so on. And um, I've heard you use a word to actually describe that language. And I think you've called it parentese, right? Uh,
Right.
would you tell us about what parentese is?
So, parentese is it's so fun to learn about this because, it's actually something that we see across all cultures. So when adults are interacting with children, and actually it's men and women do this, we automatically change our language into this way of talking that you demonstrated. So we pitch our voices higher. We draw out the vowel sounds. We basically exaggerate the sounds.
Mhm.
Um, and we do that to partially to get attention, just to get the child's attention. And then it also helps the child start to differentiate between the sounds of language. So by us making the sounds high pitched and exaggerating them, it's easier now for the child to start to hear the differences between the sounds that we're saying.
Sure.
And so we're doing that high pitch, like, "Oh my gosh,
Ah.
how are you today, right? Where we're exaggerating those vowels and we're making our voice go up. What's funny is that men do this too. So it used to be called motherese because the researchers thought that only mothers did it, but when fathers are the main caregiver, they do it as well. I think in the show notes you'll see we've got a link to a really fun video if you have time to see it, an example of the father doing that.
Yeah, and like you just said, it's not just mothers, right? It's who else can help us build that brain highway through parentese?
It's really any adult that's interacting with the child.
Mhm.
So, grandparents, aunts, uncles, even older children that are in the house that are interacting with the baby. Not to say that you always have to talk like that.
Right,
And honestly, you probably don't even have to think about it because it is something that we sort of naturally do.
right,
I will say though, this is one of the things that now I don't say very often what not to do, but
right.
um, we don't wanna do baby talk, and by baby talk, I mean where you are like, substituting, like, W sounds for Ls. Like, "Oh, who's the little baby? Who's that little? Who's that little?" You don't wanna mispronounce words. We're we're exaggerating the words. Like, "Oh my gosh, what a little cutie." We're exaggerating.
You
We're
gotta
making go up and down.
all the elements are still there, you're just
But we're not pronouncing them incorrectly.
right. Yeah, so it is different parentese is different than baby talk, and that's one thing to keep in mind as we do talk to babies, that's baby talk. Um
Yeah.
Guilty. I just did it. But it's all about how we are interacting with that baby, right? It's about that back and forth that we're having. We don't necessarily think about babies and infants and well, maybe with toddlers, the back and forth, but really there is a back and forth. And in technical terms, we call that serve and return. So what is that serve and return piece?
Yes. So the serve and return, it's comes from like tennis. You can imagine they were sort of describing it as something like a tennis match.
Sure.
So the serve is the person who initially speaks, and then the return is the other conversation partner is going to say something. And what's really fascinating about this is because of technological advances, we have more research on language, like what kinds of language really support children's development. And of course, we're going to say a lot. You're probably going to get tired of us saying it because we're going to say it a lot. Like lots and lots of talking is good. So we're going to, you know, but the thing that really drives is the back and forth.
Mhm.
And the thing about that that's powerful is I say something and wait for you to respond. And then I'm going to base on what I say next based on what you do.
Right.
So in research language, we call that contingency. Um, and it just means that what I say is dependent on what you say or do. And
Absolutely.
so we're just wired, our brains are wired to learn this way. And so this is actually too why small children, infants can't learn from screens. They can't learn from TV because there's no back and forth.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so let me say a little bit more about the screen thing because I think it is something that a lot of people don't realize. Dr. Patricia Cole at the University of Washington does a lot of really great work around this. And what she does is she brings people into the lab and she has them, say, have a baby in front of a television screen where the person on the screen is speaking Japanese. And so when we're working with babies, we often use we use novel um, sounds or novel languages to see if they're paying attention. So the child did not pay attention at all, right? Then they bring in a person
Mhm.
to the room, like actually the same person who was on the screen. They brought her into the room, and now she's starting to speak Japanese to the child. And now the child is paying attention
Attention.
and
Wow.
they're looking. And so it's just sometimes people think, and I'm not saying like, oh, never have Sesame Street on
Sure.
or things like that. I'm just saying that that's not for young children who are in this language development phase, they really need a person in
Yeah,
front of them as a conversation partner.
that's an amazing demonstration of that, and I guess I've always known that, but as you explain that, I'm like, "Oh, it just makes so much sense," and, like, I love that picture of it, so, alright, so the next question that I have for you before we get into our research and reality section, or our reality section, um, we've talked about that language development, so my question is, since this is a literacy season, should we be reading books to our kids as infants and toddlers?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you were gonna ask me like, "Hey, we haven't said anything about
We've been talking about
literacy, so what?" But so remember though, all of this talking that we're doing is supporting their later literacy because we're getting vocabulary and we're getting all these sounds of language. So that part is. And so yes, let me show you a couple of books. You might hear some noise here because one of these books is crinkly. So when you're reading, I would say, start with reading with infants right away. Some people think they should wait until you have a child who can sit up on your lap. You don't have to wait for that.
No.
Board books are designed for babies. They're sturdy, so babies want to chew on them, and that's good.
Yes.
Infants like high contrast books, so that's why you see these black and white kind of books. Books that have objects with just a label, where there's an object like a car and it says car, and again, these are all based on experiments that people have done, showing babies different kinds of books to see what they like, and that's what they like. And then also these books that are soft, that are crinkly, those of you who are listening can hear that.
That is not your headphones causing that is the book.
That's one of those soft books, so it gets their attention. And, the other thing is, so you can be saying these words and you can just be talking about the picture. You're
Mhm.
not necessarily worried at this point about telling the story from beginning to end. Let the child direct. If they want to flip the book to the back, let them flip it over. If they want to turn it the other way, let them do that. You don't have to get through the whole book. It's just like the practice, the talking.
As you don't have to read the book back to front, front to back. You can read it back to front if you want.
You can.
Um, but just getting them, yeah, that familiarity with books and the physical of it all. So, um, there's our book section of the infant toddler
We're
literacy.
gonna bring it in, yes.
All right, so let's jump into our reality section. And if you've been a long time listener, you know that we like to give you those strategies. We've kind of sprinkled them in throughout, but we wanted to give you a practical strategy to take with you from here. Um, these are things that are similar to what we've talked about, but I think that this puts it in a really nice box with a bow, more or less, of how to remember. And this tool is from Talk With Me Baby, and it is TIPS. So each of those letters, it's an acronym. Each of those letters represents something that you can use in infancy and in toddlerhood for literacy. So the T is talk. Um, Talking with your baby, paying attention, looking at those social and verbal communications. Um, like I said, we've kind of talked through a lot of this, but T is talk.
Yeah,
Um,
you're gonna get tired of us talking about talking.
right? And that's okay. You're literally listening to us talk, so you're gonna listen to us talk about talking. The I in tips is interactions. Using interactions that will help grow your baby's brain. Um, I like this in this example because it feeds right into, as we were talking about language nutrition, it says, feed your baby words. And the second one says, be a sportscaster in narrating what you do all day long. So the interactions. Uh, I think that really, really emphasizes also the serve and return, right? It's not
Right.
just about talking, but interacting.
The interactions, yes.
Yes. P is for practice. So it's not gonna just be something that happens, you do it one time. You're gonna keep doing it.
Unless you are a sportscaster, and that is what you do.
That's true.
But yes, it feels awkward, I think, for new parents, but, I promise you'll get better with practice.
Absolutely, and I tell this to, it's not necessarily this age, but a preschool, usually preschool teachers or that age range, that it might feel awkward at first, but if you just keep doing it, it'll feel more normal.
Mhm.
And talking everywhere you go, it doesn't have to happen just at home. If you're out and about, if you're in the car narrating what's going on, just practicing as you're out and about. And then the last one is singing, reading, and telling stories. Again, kind of reiterating what we talked about before, but in that nice little tips package. So
Mhm.
TIPS. Talk, interactions, practice, and sing. All right. Before we get to the next section, is there anything you wanna reiterate before we bring Haley in?
No, I think, it really is just remember being present, talking to your child, and then remember to pause, allow them to respond,
Yes.
right? As if they answered, and keep doing that back and forth. And then singing again. Um, the other thing I'll say about singing is you notice like baby songs have a lot of rhyming. So again, with that, what we're doing is actually exaggerating sounds so that the child can now start to make sense of all those sounds as they're learning language.
Yeah. All right. So, it is time. Haley, we will bring Haley in with us. It brings us to our stop, breathe, talk section, reminding ourselves to stop, take a breath, and talk about something, whatever it is, that Haley has to bring to us. It is based on our flagship parenting strategy of stopping, taking that breath, and talking with intention. So, hi, Haley.
Hi. Hey, everybody. I'm Haley Walker, and I am a member of the Science of Parenting team and a parenting educator as well. And I'm also a mom. I'm a mom to two in a blended family, and I have one on the way in a few months. So lots going on here.
And we are so excited to have you. So, do you have a question for us?
Of course, I have a question.
Okay.
I have questions. I love all this information that you have shared about parentees and the back and forth between me and my kiddos.
Mhm.
But sometimes, my experience hasn't always been that pleasant. It might be my children crying or screaming or upset when I'm trying to do those things. So I guess my question is, should I be doing things differently or am I doing something wrong?
Mm,
No, I just want to affirm there is lots of crying that happens with infants and toddlers because they don't have language skills and they're developing their language skills, right? They can't tell us really what they want with words, so they do have to use crying for that. And honestly, it's designed to get your attention so that you take care of their needs. And so I know it can feel really frustrating. I had a my youngest had colic, so I definitely went through lots and lots of crying. So some of the things I think that help are one, I use singing uh, to get through some of those things. Singing is soothing for the child, but also for me. Like it helps me to not be, ramping up my emotional trying to keep calm. Taking breaks and having like trade-off partners, and knowing and then knowing when do you need to go to the doctor or when do you need to call someone. Um, and that is generally up to each individual. I would say, as the parents, you generally know when something's wrong, right?
mhm.
Um, and so definitely getting that support, and finding that and trying not to do it all by yourself.
Absolutely.
I love the thought of singing because it does not only soothe the kids, but also me. Like it just feels
Mhm.
a little relaxing to sing my stressors, whether it's just minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I know that sometimes when, I don't even know which of my niece or nephews, but when they'd be upset, we would hold them and bounce them like face out. Um, and even if I didn't know what to sing, I would start singing like, "We're looking at a tree, we're looking at the
Mhm.
grass." Like, that it's that singing that might just be the thing that does the trick, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's rhythmic, you know, it's, saying things that rhyme, it's just soothing,
I
and also, parents, don't worry about how your voice sounds when you're singing,
right.
so if I didn't say it before, let me say it again, let me say it here, your child loves the sound of your voice, it's their favorite thing. So, whatever you sing, they're gonna appreciate. And, you can definitely learn some kids' songs or remember the ones that you sang or like sing songs that like in a kid way, like Mackenzie says, just be singing about what you're doing, all of those things.
I love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Haley, for popping in with us. And that about brings us to our end. Just as a reminder of our conversation today, um, language interaction is preparing our kids to be successful with literacy. I know we kind of joked that, oh, all we're talking about is language, but it prepares us to be successful with literacy. Being able to read is directly related to the strong connections that we have with the sounds and words, and that they make strong connections. And it's built through good language nutrition from the very beginning. So that is it for us today, all about those infants and toddlers. So we want to thank you for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. If you are a regular listener, don't forget that you can watch on video, or if you're like, "Ooh, I want the reference for that." Find us on YouTube or on Facebook for the video versions of our podcast.
Come along as we tackle the ups and downs, ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is a research based education program hosted by Mackenzie DeYoung Schelling, produced and edited by Brock Bierman, with contributions from Barbara Dunn Swanson, Dr. Connie Beecher, Haley Walker, and Morgan Noel. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook. This program is brought to you by Iowa State University Extension and Outreach.